Hello everyone and welcome to this lesson. We start with the initial sketch for our portrait, beginning with the general form of the face, followed by the hair. Determine the right places for the eyes, followed by the nose and the lips. Please make sure that you are using minimum hand pressure. We are using the freehand method here. In this technique, you need to keep an eye on the sample and transfer what you see on the paper. Try to look closely and then add all the details you see in your initial sketch as well. Here we have the prominent cheeks. Follow my hands as we are going to show the form of the face with more convexity. We have the smile lines as well. Make sure they are being added following the form of the lips and the general form of the face. When you have a laughing sample, the form of the nose changes. Make sure you draw the lines for the slightly wider and then follow the lines upwards to complete the form of the nose. The next step is working on our lines for the eyes. In this sample, as the person is laughing, the eyes are almost closed. We need to work in the same way on the other eye as well. Use minimum hand pressure to complete the forms. It is now time for the eyebrows. Consider the general angle of the face and adjust your lines with it. The face is in a 3/4 angle view and we will see more of the right and less of the left eyebrows. Add more lines for the hair as they cover the face. And now we are going to draw our lines for the neck. Razor to gently remove the extra lines. Take a look at the work in general and add more details to the sketch. Now we are almost done with this part. After adding the details on the eyes and the nose, we are going to add them to the lips as well. Follow my hand movements, please. As the model is smiling, as I mentioned, we can clearly see the teeth. That is why we are going to use the sharp tip of the pencil to draw them with all the details one by one. Here we go. We are almost done with this area. Following the smile and the general form of the lips, we are now going to make the lines for the lower lip and make them bolder. The smile is complete now. The next step is emphasizing the lines for the chin and the jawline. Pay attention to the form of the face in the 3/4 angle view and how we need to add our lines for the face in this angle. Always use a razor to remove the previous lines and layers. Please have a look how I'm getting rid of the extra lines and make sure that you are doing it slowly so you still have your main outline. Continue working on the lines, make them bolder, and then pay attention to the freehand movements I'm using to add more to the strands of the hair and its general form. As you can see on the screen, we are going to add more lines and layers on the eyebrows as well. See how each strand of hair is being added on its own, followed by the rest. Do it for the other eyebrows as well. Consider both its general form and also the direction of the lines. We are using HB pencil here as we are completing the form of the eyes as they are closed. Use minimum hand pressure and always use a sharp tip pencil. Looking at all the different parts of the work we have done so far, we are going to add the final touches to the initial sketch. Check all the parts, please, always. The nose, the lips, a line. Then we are going to work more on the forms of the eyes. This time we need to add a bit more to our hand pressure and make the lines bolder so they are more visible. Repeat it on both of the eyes and remember that apart from the closed shape of the eye, we need to add the lines for the eye line as well. Maintaining the slightly higher hand pressure, we are going to make the general outline of the face bolder, as you can see. And moving lower, we are going to work more on our lines for the neck and the shoulder. Then we are going back to the lips, going to make our lines for it even more visible. Add more pressure to your hand and use the sharp tip of the pencil. After this, it's time to begin the coloring phase. We first need to make the colors ready on our palette. Dip your medium brush into the water and take some dark brown number 676 from the pan and mix it with some of the lamp blank, that is the number is 337 from your palette. Washing our brush always to make it clean. From the glass of water we have ready besides us, we are going to add water to the brown color, burnt umber, sepia, and raw umber. You can find all the colors and the information below, as we have added all the information there for you. Starting with the sepia, we are going to take some of it from the pan and add it to our palette. As this is going to be one of the dominant colors of the work, take as much as you need and add it to the palette. Make our colors ready is one of the most important steps we need to go through as we start working on the coloring phase. You can see how I'm mixing the colors together and how I'm separating them as well. Take more water with the tip of the brush from the glass and add it to the darker brown color that we have on our palette right now. You can see when you have added more water on it how it looks like. Change your brush to a size 6 round brush as well, and first wet the surface with water using the brush like this. We are going to add the initial layers for the face, and we are going to use the wet on wet technique. In wet on wet technique, we need to carefully control the amount of water and color that we have added in different steps, following one another. Changing the brush to a smaller round one, we are going to add the first layer with our Van Dyke color that we have ready on our palette. Follow my hand movements and how I'm adding. Look at the hand pressure and how much color we are adding. Look at the forms of different parts of the face as you're adding the initial color layer, and it is going to work as a base color for the face. As the surface is already wet, when we add color layers, they can easily move on the designated wet parts. Direct the color layers where you want them to be, and then in order to show the light parts, we can use a clean and dry tissue with this tapping hand movements that you just saw to take off some colors from the already wet surfaces. And then taking more of the Van Dyke color from the palette, we continue adding more to the base color layer to the face. Carefully follow the lines. We have to work delicately on the edges to make sure you are leaving the light parts out. It's better to use the wideness of the paper as much as possible. As you saw, take more of the color combination and work on your layers on the jawline. And check all the different parts that you have already added the colors to and make sure your layers are smooth. For these parts, we need to use the sharper tip of the brush. One more point that I would like to tell you guys, we can also take more water with the tip of our brush and use it to move the color layers we have already added to the work around. And that's much easier to do. Now we need to use clean and dry tissue to take more layers off for the right parts of the cheeks. Use the tapping hand movements just like me. And now we are going to add more of the Van Dyke color again to the layers to form the facial features. We are still using the wet on wet techniques as the previous layers have not completely dried yet. Look how I'm mixing the colors. We start with the nose and follow the work with the darker layers for the eyes. And with the sharp tip of the brush, we follow the forms and emphasize on them. You can see how I'm moving the colors around. Be careful with the lines and layers that you add. And use the same brush to blend them, creating a smoother surface. Pay attention to how the darker layers blend with the form of the nose and the eyes. You can see the colors getting less dark. Moving towards the lower area, we are now going to add the basic layers for the neck with the same Van Dyke brown number 676. We are now using the wet on dry technique as the surface is dry and the color layers are wet. Start from the top and add your layer base on the forms. Step by step, we take more color from the palette and add the initial color layers to the neck. Once more, make sure you're leaving the light parts untouched and follow the forms based on the lines from the initial sketch. Now that we have added the initial layers and shown the forms to some extent, we are going to start working on our first color layers for the lips. Make sure you have washed your smaller brush and they're all clean. The red tone we are going to use is called alizarin number 003, and we continue in the same manner on the lower lip. First work on the outline and then fill the parts with the initial layer with the same color. We will have lights on the lips as well, so make sure that you're leaving the light parts untouched again. We need to use the very pointed and sharp tip of the brush to add more layers for the outlines of the lips. Taking more of the alizarin color from the pan, we add it to the palette and mix it with the Van Dyke brown. And now we are going to use this slightly darker red tone compared to the lips on the lower part of the mouth. We are still using the smaller brush, guys. Be careful with the color layers you add and make sure you're not adding the color layers on the teeth. If you did, use a tissue to take the color from the teeth quite immediately. The techniques we are using and adding this are called wet on dry right now. It allows us to control the color layers better. We are going to clean the tip part of the brush and take a little bit of the sepia and add more of the darker details for the initial parts of the mouth. Now we are going to add a darker brown color combination on the eyes. As you can see, use the very pointed and sharp tip of this small brush and add the lines delicately. We have moved to the other eye. We are now going to add the lines for it with a darker brown tone. Change the direction of your hands to add it in a better way. The next step after adding the eye lines is adding the eyelashes. As you can see, keep in mind that the eyelashes needs to be added one by one in their accurate length and direction. Makes them bolder. You can use darker brown color in order to do that. Now we are moving to the teeth. Add very thin lines here. Make sure you take your time to do this. The next step is adding a darker shadow on the internal part of the mouth. Use the same sepia color 609 on the small brush and then use it to work on the delicate parts of this area as well. Now we are adding darker colors. Please follow my hand movements where I'm adding them in order to show a more realistic model and drawing here. I'm doing it very slowly in order to add these details, making sure I'm putting them in the right area. Again, the techniques I'm using is called wet on dry. I'm trying to control the layers, that's why I'm using this technique, going around the lips to add more details and make the lips stand out more. Always the corner and the edges, they're darker and the middle part should stay lighter. Okay, now it's time to move on to the hair area with the colors that you can see on the screen. The technique as well is wet on dry. Look at my hand movements, how I'm actually using the colors. First wet, then wet on wet here, and then wet on dry on the top parts. So it's a kind of a combination of wet on wet and wet on dry. I've added more speed to these parts, but if you like to watch this tutorial in a non-speedy way, you can always check out our Patreon and watch those tutorials in real time. Now you can see because it's been dried a little more, we can add the second layer. so it becomes darker in a curvy way. Make sure your hand movements are correct. Add in more layers. Adding layers when you're doing watercolor is quite important. When and how to do it. Always look at your model a few times, then you can go through the colors better. Adding more delicate lines, going around the face outline. Go under the chin. You can see I'm using the sharp tip of the brush and add darker layers on the outline. We continue adding layers for the hair in the same manner. Look at my hand movements and please repeat after me if you are practicing this right now. The layers have dried right now and we can see the effects of the lighter and darker layers we have added to the work. Once more, we are going to change the brush to a smaller one and start working on the darker details and the form on different areas with the number 609, our sepia. Both continue on the nose and the eyes to add more details and color onto them. Now showing more is all about adding more layers to your model. We are now going to build up more layers for the eyebrows. Take more of that sepia from your palette with the sharp tip of a smaller brush. Make sure that your brush are smaller for delicate work. Look at the direction of my hand movements and where I'm adding it and how I'm adding it in a correct direction. Use the same brush and color to emphasize the darker parts on the nose, the lips, and thin lines indicating the form of the teeth. As you can see, the whiteness and the highlights of our model, they're showing as we use the whiteness of the paper. So that's quite important to remember. It is better to add more to the darker layers here for the internal parts of the mouth. And now we are going to add one more layer on the hair area to show the form better. We are going to use a medium brush and sepia color. Consider the length and the form of the strands of our hair. Let's add the layers around here as well. Look, wet on dry technique. We are continuing to use our darker brown on the strands of the hair on both sides, as you can see. The technique again still is wet on dry, and the direction how we are drawing is quite important. Step by step, the hair is getting darker and it shows better how it should look like. Going around, even though we are going through this quite fast, however, take your time while adding the details. I'm handling the brush and try to work same direction. Please have a look which area they're darker and which area I leave it be. After this, we are going to work on the background of the work. The technique we will be using would be wet on wet technique, so we need to add water to the parts we want to color with a clean brush. Make sure the brush is clean. Either clean it up or change your brush when you are doing this. Use a bigger one, as you can see. Look at the dots that I'm adding. We're using sepia color again. In a circular movements, we are going to add the background here. The next color we are going to use again is alizarin. We take it from the palette and add it to the wet parts. Don't worry about the names or the numbers of the colors. Any kind of watercolor brands you have will do the job. So don't worry about which brands you're using or if they have the colors or not. You can use the similar colors. Distribute the circles evenly on different parts of the background. You can also look at my hand movements and see where I'm adding them. As you can see, we are using the same colors, 003. So you don't have to have a lot of different colors in order to draw a portrait. With a few colors, you can always go through and complete your portrait. Look where I'm adding more colors around these areas. And make sure the highlights stays intact. The technique is wet on dry because this area, all of these areas, they have dried for already. We are adding pale red to add a little blush for the skin tone. After this, we're gonna add more of our Van Dyke brown, a wet on wet technique on these areas to make it look like a little more minimal painting. If your brush has dark colors, make sure you either clean your brush or use a different brush. We're going to change now our brush to a smaller one and take more of the alizarin color from the palette straight away and directly to our model, the cheeks area, and also the back of the eyes, the upper eyelids. Go around the nose as well, the top part. And then we are using sepia again. We have made sure that our brush is clean before using the sepia, adding more shading layers to the face, adding more dimensions. Well everyone, this is for today. I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. If you had any questions, please leave your comment. If you want to learn a certain technique, a certain medium, not just watercolor, please let me know. We have a lot of tutorials coming up, so please subscribe. And I see you soon. I hope you enjoyed. For now, bye bye.